Kitty.
Hi. What I'm presenting today is a condensed version of my MA thesis. A lot of the arguments and a lot of the points that I'll cover today, I actually get to discuss at greater length, of course, in the full version of the paper. So again, it's a very condensed version of my MA thesis. Lithographs Moon Over Huangpu River and A Prosperous City That Never Sleeps by 20th century Chinese artist Yuan Xiutang portray young women dressed in the iconic fashions of the day. The fashionable style visually defines China's modern girl. Modern girls sought to achieve the look and lifestyle associated with modern China as presented to them in advertisements, film, and other media. Despite the expected connotations of modernization with westernization, some of these young women maintained a core of traditional Chinese virtues, even as they broke a number of traditions. Images of these young women can be viewed as metaphoric representations for China itself. Like the nation, modern girls were reaching for the foreign modern, while struggling with their own identity and cultural heritage. The modern woman and the modern girl were agents of modernity in Shanghai. While the modern woman ushered in modernity through social reform, the modern girl found agency in commerce. This paper explores the modern girl identity as a liminal connection between old traditions and modernity in the visual culture of early 20th century Shanghai. The pose, clothing, and background scenes of Shanghai indicate the young women's high-pi lifestyle of consumption and consumerism. In each of the lithographs, the women's clothing and cosmetics defy tradition in favor of modernity. Here, the city scene further defines the women's individual engagement with commerce. Each scene can reasonably identify the imaginary woman's relationship to media consumption. A Prosperous City That Never Sleeps depicts a young woman in an interior setting wearing the very fashionable qipao. The setting conforms to the geometric vogue of the 1920s and early 1930s. The artist ensures that a nighttime cityscape of Shanghai is visible through the window behind her. The heavy black clouds of industrialization indicate the city's consumer climate. At the center of the image, we can see three spires. These belong to Shanghai's three largest department stores, Sun Company, Wing On, and Sincere Company. All three are located on Nanking Road, Shanghai's most popular shopping site. The scene juxtaposes Nanking Road with industrial factory smoke, working-class housing, and a modern girl. Together, this creates a portrait of Shanghai as the center for industry and commerce. It also implies the mercantile ideology of consumption, thereby visually capturing the cosmopolitan lifestyle implied by high-pi or Shanghai style. By foregrounding the modern girl, her character becomes inseparable from that of the city. She emerges as a consumer who probably keeps abreast of fashion through modern magazines. Women's magazines in Shanghai were filled with advertisements for beauty products and clothing, such as those a modern girl might find at stores like Wing On, Sincere, or Sun, all of whom offered an almost Huxleyan kind of shopping experience. Moon Over Huangpu River depicts another fashionably dressed young woman in a similar pose. The fashionable young woman is also presented in an interior setting like her counterpart in A Prosperous City. But this young woman does not wear the iconic qipao. Instead, she wears a simpler dress. Her dress is slightly looser fitting and clearly more Western in style. Rather than showcasing the city center, we're presented with an iconic view of the Bund, Shanghai's riverside row of finance and trade buildings. For many, the Bund symbolized foreign settlement as well as the city's participation in global commerce. The Bund buildings and the riverside boats obviate the city's modern commercial endeavors. We can observe the unmistakable Customs House clock with its clock tower, which has been designed to echo London's Big Ben. On the right is the pyramidic tower of Victor Sassoon's Cathay Hotel, a hotspot for visiting foreigners and a popular place for business meetings and soirees. The Bund's Western architecture and the multitude of ships on the river recall 19th century commercial trade paintings. China trade paintings were commercially produced and usually portrayed views of the Bund. By including a view of the Bund like those from early trade painting, the artist reminds the viewer of Shanghai's long trade history and its connections to the global marketplace. This young woman, in her simple but stylish dress, creates a portrait of Shanghai as a capitalist center for opportunity. The inclusion of a wristwatch repeats the concept of industrial time represented by the customs house clock. Considered with the absence of a qipao, we can surmise that although this young woman lives a high-pi lifestyle, this is a modern girl of somewhat modest means. While the demi-monde in A Prosperous City highlights the consumer character of Shanghai, the ingenue in Moon over Huangpu River emphasizes the commercial and sometimes global businesses who may have employed such modern girls. The artist presents us with young women of a modern city. They are as modern as the city of Shanghai, yet like the city view, their Chinese heritage has been modernized. Their modern form-fitting clothing defies the feminine interiority preserved by traditional Chinese dress. Chinese women's clothing traditionally cocooned the female body beneath wafts of fabric, upholding appropriate Confucian notions of a female inner. But these modern girls allow their garments to display their form publicly, much like the public lifestyle they probably lead. Perhaps most surprising in the context of tradition and Chinese artistic convention is these young women's reclined pose and direct eye contact. While such images of reclining women are well established in Western art, with images like the Venus of Urbino and Manet's Olympia, this method for depicting sensuous female beauty is not a convention in Chinese art history. Furthermore, it does not appear until the foreign settlement of China's treaty ports. In Chinese art history, the reclining pose is not only rare, but it's generally regarded as very informal posture. When it does appear in Chinese figure painting, it's usually reserved for male Confucian scholars. It also usually serves to indicate a free or creative spirit by recalling the 7 sages of the bamboo grove. To represent women in this manner would have been highly improper and socially inappropriate. Because of the reclining posture's association with male scholarship and creativity, if a female sitter was associated in this way, she likely would have been presumed to be a prostitute. In the case of Yuan Xiutang's lithographs, the pose is a strong indicator that these women are far from the traditions of womanly speech, womanly virtue, womanly deportment, and womanly work. These virtues tethered female propriety to the domestic sphere of wifehood for millennia. The interior setting would seem the only loose connection to old China and these archaic traditional virtues. Beyond this interior setting, these women's ties to traditional Chinese womanhood have been all but severed. The modern girl's high-pi lifestyle bore connotations of commerce and changing modern moralities. It was defined by a new womanhood, which admired rather than disparaged female accomplishment. Although traditional perspective could primarily be found among conservatives, the dichotomy of talent and virtue was still a balancing act for most women leading a modern lifestyle. In the lithographs, the women's appearance indicates their use of commercial cosmetics. They also allude to their consumption of ready-made Western-influenced clothing. The presence of eyeshadow and lipstick, their short hair which has been waved and bobbed, and their manicured hands all ignore the idea of the body and its parts as ancestral gifts. Instead, these point to the consumption of modern products and the acceptance of modern beauty standards introduced by foreign and global media. It is perhaps because these posters show no overt signs of product advertisement that these modern girls are also representative of the commodification of the female body. However, they also represent the commodification of the modern girl image. By the 1920s, the defining characteristics of China's modern woman were literacy, leisure, and formal education. The visual manifestation of such modernity was the qipao. Art historian Claire Roberts calls this dress a union of Chinese style and Western tailoring. Like the bob and red lipstick, it was a significant physical symbol of a modern girl's identity. There is, however, a deeper connection between the combination of Western and Chinese influences in this garment. The qipao illustrates a fusion of Western body consciousness with Chinese dress and modern ideology. These mirror the fusion of new consumer ideologies with traditional Chinese imagery present in many Shanghai advertisements of the 1930s. An example of this can be seen in this advertisement for K&K batteries, which plays upon the legendary immortality of moon goddess Chang'e. Although interiority and the traditional dichotomy of virtue and talent had for centuries separated virtuous wives from prostitutes and concubines, advertisers took advantage of the ways that tradition and modernity could be blended in imagery. In their efforts to succeed in the new Chinese consumer market, advertisers harnessed women's purchasing power by applying a dual strategy which included 1, placing modern girl images in advertisements, and 2, exploiting the Confucian tradition, which placed household budget management in the hands of wives. Essentially, advertisers used the modern girl image to grant women agency in initiating modernity. In this way, the image of the modern girl became an agent of commerce, and modern women became the agents of the modern. It is important to note here that I'm differentiating between the modern woman and the modern girl. Modern women were marketed with visual media, which touted modernity as an aspect of the product being advertised. The modern girl was the catalyzing force in the visual rhetoric of mediated language. Images of the modern girl embodied the foundational essence of modernity as an object of desire. In short, images of the modern girl had their own use value. The modern girl image was in direct dialogue with the interwar period's vernacular sociology, a phenomenon of social thought which suffused ad copy into a kind of symbiotic social circuit. As a communicative image, the modern girl is a medium for communicating modernity. It does so by expressing an idea of modern femininity, family, and social relationships. These media images are also a reflexive social link between the imaginary world presented in advertising and the reality of Shanghai's modern life. In this Q-Tex ad, we see a modern girl demonstrating the changing relationships between men and women. The advertisement visually communicates that the product, Q-Tex, has contributed to this woman's modern beauty ideal. By maintaining the standard of modern beauty, she's able to attract a modern man. The ad equates her modern manicure with her modern relationship and ignores the Confucian rules of appropriate male-female contact. Such modern girl images bore a marketable value to associated products. They further bore cultural value to the product by offering the consumer a participatory role in modernity, or more importantly, the perceived participation in a modern lifestyle. The image both visualizes and envisages the modern for women as well as men. If advertisements are the agent of modernity, then the modern girl image becomes the seductive, motivating factor for consuming the product presented. In turn, the modern girl becomes the agent of consumption, and this agency constitutes an independent use value for the image itself. Additionally, through this process, the image of the modern girl becomes a commodity which is fetishized, desired, and consumed in the attempt to attain the imagined conveniences of modern life. The modern girl image is further commodified by the mechanized ease of visual replication via new printing technologies, particularly lithography. Imagery of the modernized female form becomes entrenched in commodity through images of the modern girl. Real-life modern girls grew up in the Republican era, connected to the global mediascape through such channels as movies, radio, newspapers, and magazines. In the 1920s and 1930s, these very young women modeled themselves after the images they saw on movie screens, in theater productions, and in images fresh from the global mediascape. Such images propagated the modern girl's character and solidified her associated look, ideology, attitude, and behavior. Furthermore, with the global media climate rife with the rise of feminism and women's suffrage, the modern girl juxtaposed girlish charm with womanly sexuality, not unlike Henrik Ibsen's Nora. Despite their breaks with tradition in order to pursue modernity, the modern girl's consumption was motivated by traditional notions of self-improvement. In some cases, modern women sought academic achievements in an effort to strengthen China. Such efforts were born of a desire to prevent foreign powers from further undermining the nation's sovereignty. Modern women did not conform to traditional womanly virtues. Instead, they began to hold themselves to the masculine virtue of self-improvement through the sometimes conflicting avenues of education and the consumption of modern commodities. After enjoying some initial positive reception from May 4th supporters, in the 1930s, the modern girl look came under attack as a colonialist image of westernization. New Life advocates, such as Mei Ling Sung, advocated that women should support the national economy by buying Chinese rather than imported clothing. Although the modern girl image lost its agency for foreign modern products, it gained agency in the consumption of nationalist products. In this way, the modern girl image retained an agency for consumption. The modern girl occupied a liminal space between imperial and modern China. The modern girl and the modern girl image remained on the fringes of Chinese popular culture. The image reflexively interacted with the global mediascape, and modern girls' overt choice to participate in non-traditional activities had earned contempt from conservatives. Their public life of leisure, consumer behavior, and other engagements with commerce made modern girls a danger to old values. Modern girls simultaneously represented the downfall of old beliefs and the decadence of the modern. Yuan Xiutang's lithographs capture this liminality, as well as the commercial agency of the modern girl. As an agent of commerce, the modern girl was instrumental in establishing a successful consumer economy and creating a definition of modernity, even if it was in constant flux. The modern girl's social role in history is one of transition. She represents the historic period between the fall of imperial China and the rise of the Republican era. She represents the liberating spirit of women's education, but also the commodification of the female. The modern girl image is a metaphor for the uncertainty and turbulence of the early 20th century and for the industrializing forces within China, as well as those imposed upon it.